quote, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." Well, I feel for paper crafters, it should be death, taxes, and paper scraps. We all have them, and we're all looking for ways to use them up. Today is day 9 of making as many Christmas projects as possible with my forgotten Christmas stash. And today's focus is on paper scraps. I'll be turning them into beautiful last-minute Christmas cards. You do still have time to make these, but we better get started. Here's a look at the scraps I'll be working with today. I have also gone ahead and prepared some card bases. I've also grabbed some of my least favourite cardstock and created the card front bases. Now that cream cardstock in the end you will not see, so you could use up any of the cardstock that's in your stash for this idea. Essentially, for all the cards I'm making today, I'm going to use my scraps and paper piece them onto that base. Whenever you're working with paper pieces that are too small to fit your card front, this technique works a treat. This is the one trick that I use every time I want to use up paper scraps. I'm going to work with paper strips and punches for card number 1, and this here is actually the branding strip off of a 12 by 12 sheet of paper. I'm going to use 2 of those strips and layer them onto my card, one at the top and one at the bottom. Next, I'm going to layer in some paper strips that I have cut with my paper punch. This one is just a border punch and I have trimmed down one side of the paper strip. I'm going to layer them up and overlap them slightly. They're going to create a bit of a ruffle-like texture towards the bottom of the card here. To get a really nice finish, I like to extend the paper scraps actually over each edge of my card base there and then flip it over and trim it. I found a paper scrap that covers the remaining area on my base, and then I have added a stitched detail. All of our cream card base is now covered. I have added a sentiment, and then this entire piece can be added to the card base. There are so many benefits to creating your cards in this way. I love that I can add stitch details and you don't get them showing through on the inside of the card. They're all hidden behind that front cover there. I love just how easy it is to use up even the smallest scraps. And I love that the extra layer of cardstock actually gives the card a little bit more stability. It feels really substantial when you hold it, and I really like that. I have my paper punches out again for this second card. This is another edge punch that I'm working with. For this design, I'm going to work from the center outwards. So I did start with that larger paper strip. I don't think it was quite long enough to fit the length of my card. So I do need to trim it and work across the width of the card instead. I'm actually letting the paper scraps determine the design, not the other way around. I don't start with an idea for the card first. I actually just see what I have and see how those paper layers can combine to cover my card front. I found a fun sentiment and now it's time to add the stitching. This entire piece can now get added onto my card base. This next card is perfect to make if you have a bunch of smaller paper scraps. This is a 1 1/4 inch square punch and I am going to choose a selection of papers and just punch out a bunch of squares. You don't need to be too fussy with the papers that you choose. I have found though that this idea works best when the papers are contrasting from each other. Consider contrasting colours. I'm going to go with red and green in this case, but also look at contrasting patterns. Some of the patterns here are florals, others are more geometric, some are busier than others. You're now just going to arrange these onto your card base in a grid format. It's best to work from the center outwards, so I did find the center point at the top there, marked that with a pencil, and I knew that the center of that center square had to line up with that point. So here's a little trick for you. I know that the squares are going to be slightly short on my card base. See how you can see the little strip of cream at the bottom there? I am just going to trim that off. I'm going to make this the new size for this card. This is the perfect example of what I was saying earlier, in that I don't design the card first and then try and find scraps and supplies to fit my design. I actually work with all of the supplies that I have and adjust my design to get the most out of them. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. That's the key part to all of this. If you're really flexible with your ideas and the way that you use up your scraps, I promise you will find that you can use up so many more of them. On to card number 4, and for this one, I wanted to show you an idea that you can use if you have a bunch of thinner paper strips. This idea also works really well with the paper branding strips. I have mixed and matched my colors and designs, and I'm just going to stack them up and layer them across the card base here. I do prefer to use my ATG tape roller to do this because this adhesive is repositionable. If I want to change my mind, it is super easy to lift up the pieces and reposition them. I'll be sure to leave a link for it and the other supplies that I'm using today in the description box below. You have so many options here for the paper strips on your card base. You can use very thin paper strips here. You could just use the branding strips, or you could vary the widths to form a bit of a pattern. From here, I can add my sentiment and my stitching details. The next card I'm working on begins with this paper scrap. It is a leftover piece of cut file that I have cut, and I'm actually going to use it just as a paper layer. I am cheating here a little bit because yes, that piece of pattern paper does fit the full width and height of my card base. So I'm not really piecing paper together here, but it is still a paper scrap. I have chosen contrasting colors yet again. I just wanted the white of the cut file to really stand out. Even though I'm only working with 2 paper layers here, it is quite busy, so I am going to stick with a very simple sentiment. I was super tempted to add this die cut in, but I was concerned that I was covering up too much of that cut file. So what I thought I would do instead is use these 2 pieces to inspire the next card. Time to lock the sentiment in. It is mounted on 3D foam, and that's a nice little finishing touch. It's time to build out the base for this next card, and I wanted to show you this really cute idea again for your paper strips. You can turn any paper strip into a banner. All you need to do is fold it in half lengthways like so, and then trim the end with your scissors. You're going to be cutting through 2 layers of paper at once, and that's actually what makes the banner symmetrical. The idea I have for this card is to create 2 or 3 of these banner pieces in varying widths and sizes and run them from the left-hand edge across the card. So this one is not a centered design. In fact, it will be very heavily weighted towards the left. When positioning your banners, you'll want to place them so that they are slightly staggered. This is going to create a little shelf for our gingerbread people to sit on. I do have the tiniest piece of the cut file left over, and I kind of want to get that used all up, so I am going to layer that in behind them as well. It did feel a little bit lost back there, so I am actually going to back the cut file in this darker contrasting paper. It is the same paper that I've used in the layers for the last card, so I know it's going to look really good, and I feel like it will make it feel more substantial to be backed. I do feel like it's worth the little bit of extra time to do that. With that now back into position, I can add the sentiment at the top. I'm going to use 3D foam tape for that, and I am going to add stitching around the entire edge for this one. I can now attach all of this onto my card base, and that's another card done. Here's a close-up look at all 6 cards that I've made today. You can see all the lovely details and those paper layers. Could punches and Christmas paper be the ultimate holiday combination? They sure did come in handy for making these last-minute Christmas cards. Tomorrow, I'm going to use them to create a fun Christmas scrapbook layout. This idea is for all of those long, skinny paper scraps that I know you have. Grab those supplies and watch this video next. I'll see you all again very soon. Until then, bye!